The setting handle of the GRS Benchmate system is ideal for channel setting a wedding band, as it supports the band fully through the inside of the finger hole and will support it while you're hammering the channel down onto the stones. Before you set the stones, you need to prepare the mounting by filing the top of the channel at a slight angle. You want the outside edge of the ring to be slightly lower and the gold in the channel wall a little taller next to where the stones will be. This will give you the extra metal needed to push down over the stones and the angle that you need for hammering the metal onto the stones. Use long strokes of a hand file to shape it and then brush away any metal filings that are left on the mounting. Next, you need to cut the inside of the hole to accept the pavilion of the stones. To do this, I use a bud burr that is just smaller than the inside width of the channel and cut a tapered hole in each of the drilled holes to accept the pavilion of the stone. Go along cutting each of the holes, and be sure to use plenty of lubricant on the burr. Then brush away any filings and you're ready to cut the seat for the stones. To cut the seats for the stones, I use a heart burr the same diameter as the stone. Cut into one side of the channel right where you want the girdle of the stone to be, and then lift up on the burr. When you lift up on the burr, you need to be sure to pivot from the leading edge of the burr and pivot straight up from there. If you pivot from the center of the burr, when you straighten the burr, the leading edge will cut up, creating a big gap, and the opposite side will not be cut down to the depth that you need. So you need to be careful while cutting the seat and be certain to pivot the burr from the leading edge. Go down the mounting, cutting the seats for all the stones, and be certain to undercut the same side of the channel for each of the stones. Undercut in one side of the channel, and then lift straight up on the burr shank, pivoting from the leading edge of the burr cut down on the opposite side of the channel. Use plenty of lubricant on your burr. I like to use a solid wax lubricant called Burr Life. Be sure to brush away any of the filings left from the burr so that you can see that you have a nice clean seat cut and that it is evenly cut on both sides of the channel. Once you have all the seats cut, you need to place the stones into the mounting. Tip the stone on an angle and place the girdle of the stone into the undercut side of the channel. Then, using a brass pusher, push the stone down into place in the seat. It needs to be a nice tight fit, and the stone must sit level across the channel. The stone should be so tight that you have to press it down with a brass pusher. If the stone falls down into the seat on its own, it will be difficult to tighten it. Continue down the band and push all the stones into place. If you were doing an eternity band with the stones all the way around, I would only place 4 or 5 stones in place and hammer the channel down to secure them and then continue on. But for this ring, we can place all the stones across the top of the ring into the channel. You want to make sure that the spaces between the stones are even and that the stones are not overlapping. If the stones are touching or overlapping, you will chip them when you push down on the metal. You want to make sure that each of the stones is perfectly level and tight in the channel. To finish the setting process, you need to tighten the channel down onto the stones. I use a hammer handpiece for this, but the force of the blows will cause the stones to bounce out. So I take a little strip of cellophane tape and tape across the top of the channel and right across the tops of the stones. I can then use the hammer handpiece on my flex shaft to hammer the metal in the channel down over the stones, and I do not have to worry about the stones bouncing out of their seats. I begin on the side of the channel that was not undercut. I can hammer this side of the channel down, and that will lock the stones into place because the opposite side of the stone is already in the undercut seat. Hold the anvil, the hammer handpiece, on the same angle as was filed on the top of the channel wall. This will allow the metal to form down and out over the stones. Using a hammer handpiece on your flex shaft gives you even and continuous blows. This bends the metal down over the stones evenly and smoothly. Once the stones are locked into place, you can remove the cellophane tape. Then, using the hammer handpiece, go right along the edge of the channel and make sure the metal is down tight over the stones and that it's down even in between the stones. Then, with just a light touch on the hammer, take nice easy strokes and move the anvil back and forth across the channel to smooth out any of the deeper hammer marks that you made in moving the metal down and out over the stones. Now that the stones are all in place and the metal is down over the stones securely, we need to clean up the tops of the channels. I use a number 6 cut needle file and just take a few light, even strokes across the channel, eliminating any high spots in the top of the channel wall. Next, I use a triangular file with a safety edge and letting the safety edge ride on top of the stone. I use the triangular file to even up the metal edge that protrudes over the stones so that it's nice and even. Once we have that evened out, I go back to my flat file. I use the flat side of a half-round file. File until the hammer marks are almost gone. You don't want to file until the marks are all out, because then once it's sanded, you will have taken too much metal off. I then use a brown rubber silicone wheel to go over the tops of the channel and remove any file marks. This final step will remove all the last marks from the anvil of the hammer handpiece. When the rubber wheel is in contact with the gold, you want to keep it moving. If you hold it still at any point, you'll grind an uneven spot in the top of the channel wall. So while it's turning, you want to be sure to keep it moving. Next, I use a knife-edge brown silicone rubber wheel to smooth the edge of the metal that is along the stones. The final step is polishing, and I begin the polishing here at the bench with a small hard felt wheel and some white diamond compound. I go over the top of the channel wall and then tip the wheel to use the edge of it to get down along the diamonds. Then buff the entire ring on your buffing machine and clean it in the ultrasonic, and the ring is finished, ready to be delivered to your customer.